So, what is Mayat? Well, nobody really knows. Or, more precisely, there is no single comprehensive definition of Mayat, and that is what makes it so interesting. So, let's take a trip to ancient Egypt and try to understand what Mayat meant in ancient Egyptian society. The ancient Egyptian worldview tended to emphasize stability and preservation of an established order. Much of Egyptian thought was concerned not with transforming the world but with maintaining the balance believed to have been established at creation. So, why were ancient Egyptians interested in preserving the status quo? Well, this is how I personally understand it. Ancient Egypt was essentially an oasis within the deserts of northeastern Africa, a narrow, fertile strip along the Nile surrounded by the vast, arid lands of Sahara to the west and the eastern desert to the east. This stark contrast between the rich river valley and surrounding deserts shaped both the material basis of Egyptian life and the value placed on preserving the stability within this limited zone of productivity. The predictability of the Nile inundation created exceptionally favorable conditions for agriculture, allowing Egypt to sustain a dense population within a narrow strip of cultivated land. This environmental stability made long-term planning possible and reduced pressures that elsewhere often led to social upheaval. As a result, Egyptian society created strong administrative institutions aimed at preserving an already functioning productive system rather than transforming it. This context helps to explain why Egyptians often viewed outside world with suspicion and why Egypt tended toward relatively inward-looking stance, at least until the New Kingdom. Mayat is personified as a goddess, the daughter of Atum and later Re, after 18th dynasty, who established Mayat at the time of creation. Of course, the term daughter is not used in a biological sense. Atum or later Re is the demiurge who sets in place the cosmic order, while Mayat is the personification of the order established by the demiurge. As a goddess, Mayat personifies truth, justice, cosmic order, harmony, rightness, and the principle of true witness. As a principle, Mayat describes the relation between government and the gods, standards established for the netherworld, so-called judgment of Osiris, for example, and the ultimate force operating the cosmos, thereby reinforcing the sense of stability desired by the Egyptians. Siegfried Morens wrote, Mayat is the right order in nature and society as established by the act of creation, and hence means, according to the context, what is right, what is correct, law, order, justice, and truth. This state of righteousness needs to be preserved or established in great matters as in small. Mayat is therefore not only the right order but also the object of human activity. Mayat is both the task which a man sets himself and also as righteousness, the promise and reward that await him on fulfilling it. I would like to underline that Mayat is the condition of harmony that requires continuous effort to be maintained. When this effort weakens, the world tends to fall back in chaos. So let's take a brief look at the concept of chaos in ancient Egypt. This will help us to understand the nature of the forces that work in opposition to Mayat and how they were integrated into the worldview of ancient Egyptians. The idea of constant struggle between order and disorder may be found in many ancient cultures. Ancient societies lacked the instruments and conceptual tools required for scientific inquiry as we understand it today. So the idea of forces pushing the world toward disorder, change, and instability provided a coherent explanation for why reality often resisted human expectations. In ancient Egypt, the Concept of Isfet, commonly described as chaos, the opposite of Mayet, is interpreted as the dissolution of divine order in the world, as well as the behavior of the people who indulged in evil practices, and as a consequence of intrusion of foreigners in Egypt. According to some authors, the Isfet coexisting with Mayet did not happen until well after creation, and in the beginning there was no chaos, only divine order. The word Isfet, meaning chaos or chaotic behavior, has also been interpreted as having other quite different meanings, such as violation of Creator God's aim at all people being equal. Isfet was associated with several Egyptian deities, most notably Seth and Sekhmet. In later period, Seth in particular became increasingly linked to disorder and violence, especially through his opposition to Osiris. However, this does not represent a simple transformation into an evil god, but a shift in emphasis within the Egyptian religious framework. There are many ways of understanding the relationship between order and disorder: dialectical, political, religious, and other. In ancient Egypt, these concepts were also actively shaped and employed by the structures of power in pursuit of their own specific interests. This could be the topic for the separate discussion, but for our purposes, I would like to generalize the concept of chaos as possible. Chaos is not something inherently evil. It could be understood as the agent of change in nature and in economy and politics and so on. Change does not automatically imply something negative, but it includes uncertainty. There is no guarantee that the outcomes will be beneficial. In a very simple way, Mayat symbolized stability, harmony, and status quo, while Isfet change, uncertainty, risk, and the movement toward the change of current order. According to some authors, Mayat functioned as the key concept for establishing the norms of social justice. Yen Asman writes, "The Egyptian language has a generic term for the totality of all social norms, Mayat, which he proposes translating as connective justice. The so-called great hymn to Osiris, inscribed on the stela of Amenmos, the overseer of the cattle of Amen, provides an idealized image of harmonious society living in accordance with the principles of Mayat. Majesty has taken its seat. Abundance is established by his laws. Roads are open. Ways are free. How the two shores prosper. Evil is fled. Crime is gone. The land has peace under its lord. Mayat is established for her lord. One turns one's back on falsehood." However, the practical implementation of Mayat was possible only through the work of a specific group of officials headed by viziers. Viziers implemented royal decisions and enforced laws. These laws, however, should not be understood as a codified body of norms and regulations, but rather as a combination of precedents set by former officials, royal decrees, procedural conventions, and moral principles guided officials in their day-to-day decisions. I would like to avoid a potential misunderstanding. The existence of sources attesting to Mayat does not automatically mean that ancient Egyptian society lived fully in accordance with it. Moreover, the situations in which people of low status addressed their pleas directly to high officials in search of justice, as described, for example, in the tale of eloquent peasant, were in fact far removed from everyday reality. Officials of ancient Egypt usually claimed to do Mayat or to speak Mayat. On their monuments, they recited a long list of evil or reprehensible actions they had avoided during their lifetimes. They also illustrated their moral principles by evoking praiseworthy actions toward vulnerable people, such as protecting widows and orphans, providing grain and cattle to the poor, and defending the humble against the abuse of the powerful. I would like to underline that ancient politics were still politics, and there could be a significant gap between declared principles and actual practice. In this context, ancient Egypt should not be idealized. This does not imply that state governance in ancient Egypt followed Mayat as a practical political principle. With rare exceptions, Egyptian political authority was not constructed from bottom up, and there was little space for civic participation, deliberation, and individual political agency. Cheers. Mayat functioned as both a general framework and a set of templates for moral behavior, reinforced by the expectation of punishment in this world and in the afterlife in case of crime and misbehavior. This moral language was not merely symbolic, it had direct legal and institutional consequences. Thus, through this conception of Mayat, we find loosely defined and powerful notion of moral and social order, which acts as a central criterion for a related value system, like the gods, pharaohs, and important officials were said to rule by, with, and in Mayat. The language applied to persons directly parallels the qualities attributed to the gods in the primordial and world-sustaining role. Like an individual to act corruptly while fulfilling the role of a judge would not merely constitute an offense against the persons, but would also represent an impious undermining of divine prerogatives and universal order. For example, the Nauri decree included harsh penalties if judges were remiss in their duties in relation to the estate of Osiris. Such an offended judge was to be beaten, stripped of his role, and reassigned as the cultivator attached to the house of the gods. It was believed that only under such moral and orderly rule could Egypt continue to exist in peace and stability. In this video, we haven't discussed the procedure also known as the Judgment of Osiris. Well, although it is closely connected to the concept of Mayat, in my own opinion, it is more closely related to the concept of Egyptian netherworld. Regarding Mayat, it is important to understand that Mayat is a divine order rather than an algorithm. There are 42 so-called negative confessions preserved in the Papyrus of Ani, also known as the Book of the Dead. But it doesn't mean that Mayat consists only of these 42 statements. In reality, it is far more complex concept. For this reason, the expression to do Mayat doesn't mean following a fixed set of rules or instructions. Mayat never had and couldn't have had a complete or final definition of what fully belongs to it and what doesn't. The other side of this is that in specific historical and political situations, different groups claim their right to interpret Mayat in their own way, which in the end is fairly constant feature of human history. It is also worth noting that the concept of Mayat reflects, to a large extent, the economic and geographical conditions of ancient Egypt and, to some degree, its inward-looking worldview. At the same time, Egyptians did not seek to impose their own culture on others, and according to some sources, they learned foreign languages in order to trade and maintain diplomatic relations. Well, thank you for watching, and let's try to do some Mayat. Who knows, maybe it will help us resist the chaos of our time.